I think technology has moved so fast that actually it's made it easier to get a broader scope, a better understanding of all the elements of a working supply chain. Alan Waller, another good mentor of mine, often talked about cooperation, where people compete and cooperate, because in terms of the sort of business processes of supply chain, you've got to cooperate or collaborate and share best practice, and people are open at sharing best practice.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the video podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. In this podcast, we speak to industry leaders who share their ideas, thoughts and anecdotes from within the logistics world.
Welcome to another episode of Chain Reaction podcast. Today, I would like to welcome Paul Brooks. He is a very senior and experienced leader. He's been for over 25 years operating at the C-level, and for over 35 years has been working across various industries and various disciplines, spanning from automotive to consumer goods. But quite a big chunk of your career has been in supply chain and logistics environment. So, Paul, how did you come to love that space?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, delighted to be able to contribute to your podcast. I've been, as you say, like many people, I think I fell into logistics and supply chain. I joined Boots on their graduate retail marketing scheme, actually, and back in 1985. So it's going to be 40 years this year I've been part of our industry and working in supply chain. So did a maths degree, and so I've always been really interested in numbers and the visibility of stuff in supply chains have always drawn me to. Boots set up a team, and I joined it, and it's as simple as that. So, like many, fell into supply chain. Rose with that team.
I'm with you on that one. Yes.
So, back in the days we were counting branch stock on with pencils on sheets, Michael. And right. I had the joy of the first IBM PC arriving in my buying office, and it was a 5.25-inch floppy disk, and that's the first time from IBM, the first time I'd seen a PC. Right. So I think unlike many, I've been right through that variation, and of course, the supply chains and the world of supply chain logistics, especially, has changed unbelievably in those 40 years, unbelievably. And I think we all say that, but it's really exciting. And, I'm still bounce out of bed in the morning, excited about what the world of supply chain is going to bring us.
It is absolutely. It is an amazing space. I mean, to many it appears kind of unglamorous, but I think you have a mathematical background. I mean, to what I like in logistics myself is the complexity of the thing, the scale of challenges that we're solving, and that's what makes it exciting. As soon as you just scratch the surface, there is so much depth beneath, and
I think from my perspective, Michael, I've always, in essence, worked with a lot of engineers. I've been very surprised that actually within every part of a operational supply chain, we don't have engineers buried within it, and how they think rather than what they're qualified in. So very detailed, like numbers, like precision, like getting stuff done, and actually can pretty much turn their hand to anything in order to fix something. And that's great. So the people are great, but you're right. The complexity or the challenges that a supply chain and logistics environment bring every day is probably what keeps us all here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of complexity, it's actually quite interesting. I mean, over the past, especially in decade, we actually see accelerated kind of evolution of logistics and supply chains. Kind of in general, I mean, historically, and many still view logistics is a space where you're moving boxes, and you have some people moving those boxes. In some other instances, you actually have a bit more sophisticated a view of the world. So how do you take that?
Yeah, I mean, I smile as you're describing, the sort of the man in the streets view potentially of box shifting of logistics. In the 80s, we tried to move away from this view of trucks and sheds. And I probably took us about 20 years to move away from that philosophy. And Neil Ashworth, who's a good friend of mine, who followed me as chairman of the Chartered Institute, wrote an article about sexy logistics, trying to attract our young people into logistics. So look, actually, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and actually in any discipline you can learn. but also in any area of logistics and supply chain management, there are challenges that are worthy of any career. So I stand on it's exciting, it's challenging. I think technology has moved so fast that actually it's made it easier to get a broader scope, a better understanding of all the elements of a working supply chain. Alan Waller, another good mentor of mine, often talked about cooperation. So actually where people compete and cooperate, because in terms of the sort of business processes of supply chain, you've got to cooperate or collaborate and everything else and share best practice. And people are open at sharing best practice. But from his perspective, it's supply chains that compete. And he said that first 25, 30 years ago, and it's still true today. The best supply chains are buried in the best businesses, and that's through all elements. But now it's about partnership, collaboration, visibility, technology. That's what drives partnership today, not people. People still are a core part of it, and relationships are crucial to supply chain success. However, in today's supply chain, technology, visibility, and data are the sort of unlocks for the better and more sustainable supply chains.
Absolutely. I mean, 100% agree. And you touched on a couple of very important points. I'd like to start with, definitely want to get back to kind of the collaboration and cooperation one. But I want to start with the technology, because that's obviously our passion and that's where we come from. And I understand that to many kind of the outsiders, when they look in, exactly as you said, it's like it's sheds and people moving boxes. But actually, I kind of the way that I look at this is like almost like a hygiene factor. Anyone can move a box, anyone can have a shed, but actually what you do with the information that flows you, that makes you do those things, and what kind of information and insight you then have and how you leverage it. So what are your views on the technological side and how it evolved and where we are today? Let's hold on a little bit on AI thing. I think it's one of the topics that we'll capture a bit later. But technology kind of in general.
I mean, it's such a broad question. It's evolved so much, isn't it, over time?
Yeah.
I think from the starting point is the depth of understanding of what the customer needs. And over the last 20 years, technology aimed at customer demand has been, and our understanding of customer demand and its impact on our supply chains. And I take that from the point of source, the sort of the plow to plate, if you're in a grocery supply chain. Obviously the growth in my career of China and the Far East and the cheaper manufacturing has meant volume supply chains in terms of TEU growth and shippers and shipments, and the visibility of the length of lead time, the cost of inventories have all changed radically. And what that has meant is that the visibility, so tracking what's happening, has been a significant investment in supply chains and an increasing investment. And when we get to other more advanced technologies, we can talk about that in a bit more detail. But I went through RFID, so tagging clients, and starting in the sort of late 90s and then the early 2000s, really understanding how that would impact a supply chain. So technology has been at the heart. I set up a business when I was at Unipart. We set up a fulfillment business called youfulfill.com and launched that at a dinner at the Bank of England, actually. So it was a really innovative marketplace platform to support marketplace platforms. Actually, none of those platforms exist today, but how we had envisaged them working and the volume of trade that goes through similar supply chain platforms is exactly what we predicted. And the value of it is exactly what we predicted. So it was completely different. So you couldn't set up a business to service it. But that was all obviously, e-commerce, as we would call it today, B2B e-commerce that we were focused on then, as well as B2C. It has transformed how supply chains operate. And we've taken those learnings from the systems and embedded them in our core supply chain systems, ERP, WMS, transport management systems, and linked those together. So the other big thing, I think, Michael, is the ease of integration the tools that
Right.
we can
Yeah.
integrate and the platforms that we can integrate has transformed how we manage supply chains over the last 20 to 30 years. And that's only accelerating from the last 10 years. So it's technology
Yeah.
has been very much at the heart of the transformation of global supply chains. Yes.
No, perfect. And I think this is exactly kind of an ideal setup for the second part of our conversation that you made of the second bit, that the point that you mentioned on the collaboration, because where technology plays absolutely crucial role in enabling collaboration to be run effectively,
Yeah.
to be run consistently,
Yeah.
to be run robustly. So, but there are still some challenges to collaboration, and some of the players in the sector actually have a bit of resistance or some doubts around that. So how
Yeah.
would you look at that, and how would you address those?
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, I agree. I've been trying to be, let's say, a collaborator for 30 years or more. So trying to get parties, obviously I've been working largely on the commercial and business development rather than the operational sides of all the businesses I've been part of globally. And trying to get parties to work together for the common good is a bit of the heartbeat of a human relationship. So what we're really trying to do is to say, can people work together? And we build those relationships, and I think we build them still face to face rather than through the data or the technology. What the data has allowed us to do is spot where the opportunities to collaborate are, and it's done that more effectively than we could ever do in the past. So getting a detailed understanding of data and how we manipulate data to create opportunities, I think, is the logisticians. It's the heartbeat of what a world-class logistician is today. Yeah. And then we move to, okay, commercially, how do we share value? How do we create value, and how do we share value? And if parties can trust one another in creating the value and getting the visibility of where that comes from and how it's allocated, how it's made, how we control it, how we share it, if we can move through that process, then actually collaboration works much more strongly. Because people believe what they're seeing, the data they see. So I think the speed of the visibility of the issues and the opportunities now has made collaboration easier. I still think we're human beings, and therefore, personal interests, politics, geopolitical impact, risk, resilience, these are all key ways of we need to build those into any formal collaboration. But there are also barriers to collaboration as well if people's view are the wrong side of a risk equation or a resilience equation or something like that. But I do think that investors and shareholders are much more open to the risks around supply chains, and therefore collaboration in their minds reduces those risks.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I had a very interesting quote from one of our clients who said that we have tons of data but not enough information.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things, and this is what technology kind of can help, is actually extract out of data that so many companies are just swimming in. But it's all kind of murky, and it's just making sense out of it and use that insight. And what you said is rightly is it's people that make decisions. It's people that actually work with other people, that collaborate with other people. There's a change management element. I not necessarily kind of love this consulting word, but it is a softer side of things.
Yeah.
Without which it's actually not going to work. Yeah. And that's where both the resistance as well as enablement, I think, could be coming from.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I spent 20 years, with Unipart, and we had the Unipart way, and people engagement was the heart of it. But even then, we were sort of saying, look, it's people, process, technology. They're the three component parts of the supply chain transformation that we're trying to enact. And in most business transformations, as you know, you're a consultant yourself, Michael, so you've seen many, many different businesses with similar problems. So they come from different walks of life, and they're not just in supply chain, but it's still people, process, technology. And I'm an outsourcer. Contract logistics has been my lifeblood. So sales has been my lifeblood. But the words are always, don't outsource a bad process. Make sure you fix the process first, because actually if you lose connectivity with your own business process and it's not optimized for what your strategy is trying to deliver, then you will go wrong. And I think technology and data, and you're right with clean data as well. If we don't have good data, then we will go wrong. Almost certainly, we'll just get there faster. But if we'll still end up in the wrong part faster.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by FLOX, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit flox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
That's very true. That reminds me of a couple of clients, and literally a couple of clients, big global ones, that had an idea that they can outsource the headache.
Yeah. Get rid of the problem. Yeah.
And that is quite a naive view, I think.
Agreed.
And not necessarily going to result in the good stuff, in a good outcomes. But we talked about technology, and I did kind of stop you on talking about AI, and I think now is the topic. It is on everybody's lips. People are talking AI, and to many people, it probably has as many meanings that they can come up with.
Yes.
So what does AI means for logistics in logistics space, and hopefully it's and it should go way beyond chat GPT and typing emails. But it is and it is part of the technological evolution. They may actually change or help changing various processes and the way people work. Enabling a greater degree or levels of collaboration. So what do you take on this?
I mean, I would sort of look at the journey of automation, robotics, AI as a sort of a sequential journey in terms of validating and understanding how we can impact supply chains. I think AI and the automation of intelligent decision making has been very much focused on the customer and the customer business processes and creating options to improve that engagement. Supply chain has sort of lagged behind that. So I did a piece of research with 20 supply chain directors only in the last 3 months, looking at the real projects that got on the ground around what we would define as AI. And for me, it's linked heavily with digital transformation of supply chain processes and the digital transformation of relationships. And that sort of leads us into what's the next phase of decision making, which is the agentic AI, the next phase of AI. So AI a lot of what we've done in supply chains has been machine learning, automation, speed of processing. So we've automated processes that people could understand, and it hasn't driven significant insight into the transformation agenda for a chief supply chain officer. It has been focused on business efficiency, which I think you alluded to, Michael. But now we're starting to see with agentic AI the options dashboard appearing. And this gives chief supply chain officers the opportunity to change, test, simulate outcomes based on a much wider data set. And so in terms of all of a sudden, we are bringing sort of risk and resilience into our choices around optimization as well. So I think that's what I'm starting to see supply chain officers looking at in detail. And now we're getting more, and feels a bit more like a consultancy, Michael. We're starting to see higher qualified analysts coming into the teams of the supply chain officers, but they're not just stopping at the sort of end-to-end inventories or forecast errors and things like that. They're buried into optimized resourcing, and all of a sudden, I genuinely believe optimized cost to serve for supply chains. And if we can get to that prize, then people will start to really utilize them at the next level. I don't see. Let's say I talked to 10 of the top 20 UK businesses in terms of the supply chain volume and scale, and they are looking at projects, and I would say suboptimally, but their scale. Okay, so suboptimally for their supply chain, but for the majority of UK businesses, these are significant scale projects to look at how they might optimize parts of their supply chain, and then they'll start to sweep in the collaborators or the partners, suppliers of their supply chain to really try and make a difference. So I see AI as part of the journey. It is speeding decision making based on information that you can rely upon. And I see that's the step change that the supply chain officer, because ultimately we have to deliver the can of beans to the shelf.
Right.
Yeah, we can't fail in that physical activity, and there's no point optimizing something that lets a customer down. So aligning our optimized performance against customer requirement, I see as the next sort of material change that we're seeing for over the last 12 to 18 months in supply chains. What people focus on, and people are investing in. I use it advisedly, digital transformation to support that supply chain.
Right.
But it's involving a lot more AI and agentic AI as part of their activity. And that's come from learning elsewhere in customer areas and customer optimization as well. Yeah.
Right. No, thank you, Paul. That makes very good sense, and definitely kind of resonates with the thinking that I had. But that also kind of echoes of some of my previous kind of career consulting engagements, where a super sophisticated model which allowed some simulations and optimizations might become like a video game.
Yes.
Where people play for the sake of playing.
Yeah, agreed.
Not necessarily asking the right questions. It's just like, let's see how amazing the stuff is.
Yeah.
Which kind of defeats the purpose.
I agree.
We still need to deliver a can of beans. Exactly as you said. It still has to go there. Yeah.
I love the fact that we're still pretty much a practical, hands-on industry. So, I mean, analytical and global optimization has its place. Of course it does. Because actually, as you said right up front, supply chains are still complex. They've still got lots of moving parts, and we need to be aware of the risks of making changes. Which lever to pull? I remember implementing a big forecasting system back in my automotive days when we were trying to forecast 120,000 plus SKUs across 18,000 suppliers, and get those delivered in a synchronized way through multiple networks. And the system had something like 176, I think was the number, different attributes we could change or modify.
Right.
And the partner at the time who was helping us implement only used 6, Paul. The system will be better than you on the other 170.
Yeah, and it's actually quite interesting that you mentioned that. And very often, because I used to do the same thing as you said, it's like you do risk sensitivity analysis as well, because some levers can actually make a lot of difference, and some levers you pull one way or the other, but it actually doesn't move a needle.
Yeah.
But that's I think sets us up on a very, very nice kind of topic. So we did talk about FLOX, and we did talk about the kind of the platform that we're building, and the technology, including the AI, but all the advancements of technology, kind of the cloud, the visibility, the transparency, the analytics is very much at the heart of what we do. With our main ambition is to enable colleagues to be as productive, as effective as possible. But we're also seeing that the current market conditions are somewhat challenging with whatever happens on the global economic scale and kind of macroeconomics, as well as global politics and the tariffs and everything else. So how do you see the sort of the service offering that FLOX has from a technological point of view kind of fits with the market in terms of kind of where we are and on the adoption journey of the new tech by the market?
Yeah. I mean, so there's probably 3 questions buried in that statement.
There's 3 questions in there, yes.
Welcome to the complex world of supply chain. So taking them in sort of component form, I think the market remains with capacity at this moment in time. Right. So because of the investments we've made in visibility and digital and data, we can access that capacity like we've never been able to access it before. So that's a one key reason I believe why FLOX has its time now in terms of actually understanding how best on behalf of customers and suppliers and partners to utilize that capacity to optimize cost and optimize service. That's been a holy grail. I started with in 3PL with Excel back in, I think, 1996. So it's just a while ago, And we had, if you took the 24-hour clock, we had running still a large fleet in the UK, it's now DHL, of course, 57% of our capacity was available to be used. Okay, so it'll still be high today if you take the 24-hour clock of running time, and let's say it's 38% or something like that today, but it's not going to be naught. I can assure you of that. and so what we've now got the ability to do is engage with every piece of that capacity with a customer demand. So that's the second part of your question. Every customer, even if they're operating on a spreadsheet in their business, a system or a solution like FLOX can access that capacity, access that data. And it's really easy for them to engage with FLOX in doing that. So it creates this virtual marketplace of capacity. But more importantly, it creates a time-based view of that capacity. And an execution system, which is obviously running an AI platform, can actually say, how will I best utilize that for the entire marketplace rather than the customer-supplier relationship? So it's opening up opportunities because it's looking at sequentially the moving parts of the supply chain, not just the plan. So I think that's a real advantage. But I think the final and most important part of this sort of why would FLOX be successful is because actually it enables people not to undertake the investment.
Right.
Okay. It will allow them to do all of those things, but they don't actually have to change their business processes. They can just automate the business processes that make a difference in supplying their customers today. And I think that's a sort of holy grail that we've been hunting for the 30 years since I've been looking at marketplace technologies. So, and I revert back to an earlier point, because of the speed of integration that is available on just core systems, and we look at Microsoft 365 as a core system and Dynamics as a core system today for these small businesses, then actually they can integrate easily with a platform such as FLOX, which then can integrate with SAP and Oracle at the other side. So it actually creates a platform that is a pure execution play for small and large businesses alike. It doesn't differentiate because it's only differentiating on the shipment or the order or the capacity utilization. So it's breaking it down to the area of optimization that needs focus. And that actually adds value to both parties and puts cash in bank accounts of the partners involved. So that's what I would say, that those are the three core elements of why a marketplace solution such as FLOX will work.
No, 100%, and that's exactly where we're thinking. That's exactly why we're doing this and why we committed. But you mentioned a couple of very good points, or very important points. Is first of all is optimization for the benefit of the network, not just an individual business. And sometimes kind of the companies, especially the bigger ones, they kind of tend to kind of pool the benefits just for themselves at the expense of potentially others. So the kind of the independent platform can optimize for the benefit of the whole of the network, and then share the benefits, share the spoils effectively with everybody. But that takes a certain degree of trust, and you mentioned that word before, and this is actually something that I'd like to kind of pick up on that as well. Is trust has been a kind of a staple issue in the sector between, I don't know, buyers and sellers and partners and subcontractors and all that. There's quite a degree of, or quite a lack of trust and kind of reserved behavior. So how do you think a technology or any other change maybe in people behavior processes or with AI help can actually address these things? So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're relationship businesses, and so you have to trust one another to do what we've promised or contracted to do. So that's a really important part of any sort of commercial relationship. But as human beings, we want to trust people and we want to be confident in people as well. So let's move that to the marketplace conversation, business to business rather than point to point. And I think in any marketplace, as long as the solution or the outcome is delivered as promised or committed, then it builds confidence. Confidence builds trust. Trust is something that is given with some reluctance, but can be taken away very easily. And so actually, we've always said in supply chain and logistics, you're only as good as your last delivery. And that's quite often the case. It's a hard environment to work. And that's why if you've got a customer relationship that you rely upon to keep your business moving forward, and you pass some of that relationship trust into a marketplace, you want it to be honored. And that's why I think trust is, as I say, hard won, But once delivered, confidence is passed and people reuse it very quickly because they do trust it's going to deliver its outcome. It's like any relationship. So I think the logistics industry is a unique industry because it, by default, de facto, it has to collaborate. We don't all have ships on the seas, so we have to work with anybody who runs a container, and we have to trust what they're saying in terms of delivery points and everything else like that. We then actually have shared user solutions. Most of transport in some way is shared user, so we have to trust that the priorities that are set are working for our benefit as well as the benefit of others. But we recognize there is a commercial trade-off in doing. I don't have to run a truck. So why not, buy pallets at £20 a pallet delivered or £50 a pallet delivered or whatever? As long as that commercial promise is met, that you're going to deliver my pallet to a customer, then I'm happy. I understand the risk I'm taking by passing that across. But actually, if you look across the networks in our industry, millions of movements a day are trusted into those networks because they deliver on their promises. In the main, 99% of their time. They're not always going to work. And, I've run operational companies and I get people phoning me up saying, actually, you haven't delivered my parcel or I haven't delivered my pallet. And I said, madam, have you looked outside your window? It's thick snow. We're doing our best. So, we are still at the we are still at the mercies of a physical delivery. And I think the thing that's really changing that builds trust is both visibility, but our ability to communicate. And I think if we can utilize our technology to make our communications better and easier with every node in the supply chain, it's not just customers. Michael, there's every supplier of a service has a customer. It's not the end consumer of the product, and we both know
necessarily,
that.
Yes.
And so what we've got to do is make sure the flow of communication and information is trusted, and that's based back on good data. A marketplace such as FLOX can operate freely because it provides the trust, the integrity of both information, both transaction optimization, and a fair share in that with the marketplace and with the customer. So best value is created. If people trust that you're working for them and they're getting the best value they can for what they place into a marketplace, you will be successful. And I think that's the essence of trust in any marketplace, I believe.
Perfect. No, that makes very good sense, and I completely agree. And it's interesting. I mean, we're coming towards the end of our podcast, and I think we've covered as much as we could in such a short time. It's such a deep and important and difficult topics. So thank you very much, Paul. But I'd like to finish our podcast on a slightly different subject. So you also a published author.
Oh yes.
And you've published two versions of the book called Inspired. So for pun intended, what has inspired you to write a book?
Well, I mean, I've been, I started off looking at the sort of trust equation anyway, and I've been always thought about collaboration and trust. But as I looked more at the relationships, I recognized actually that the one big area that we could improve upon is leadership and understanding how we could make a transformational difference in our leadership capability and capacity. And I took that from the sort of British Army, where corporals are the key leaders in the British Army and everybody else is serving to lead, to ensure that on the ground we make a difference. So that served to lead, changing the model around. So I started writing about leadership, Michael, and I wrote every day for 3 years about leadership, and I published some of that. But I ended up with 2,000 or more articles on leadership. And I thought, there's definitely a few books sitting in here. And so technically, I've found a way to put those together I hope for taking the quote of a well-known figure. My first book obviously uses people like sort of Winston Churchill, Steve Jobs, Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. But I used that quote to put in a current business leadership context of today, and how we build better organizations and how we build better relationships. And I use what I call my prime leadership model, which is persistence, resilience, inspiration, motivation, and endurance. I won't go into any detail, but I write about that all the time. And it just inspires me to do more. And people seem to love what I write about. And I'm just having some fun putting it into words. Technically written 10 books, so they're going to come out every 6 months. There'll be another one. And
right. Okay.
so it should be a real fun journey, but hopefully it will make a difference at multiple levels to improve leadership in our world of business. So if it makes a small contribution, happy days.
No, thank you, Paul. Well, I've got one. I'm getting your newsletters. I think on a daily basis with some of the good quotes, and many of them resonate really well. So thanks again, Paul, and thank you for joining the podcast. And I look forward to continue. Actually, there's been quite a few very big topics. So hopefully you will agree to be invited and accept at some time in the future that we delve in deeper into some of those.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Michael, and obviously I look with interest on how FLOX performs over the months and years ahead, because it sounds like a really exciting project. So thank you again for sharing that with me.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning into Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you have a story or opinions to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to Chain Reaction or visit flox.is for more information. See you next time.